It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching the show over on YouTube already, be sure to hit the subscribe bell, hit the subscribe bell, the notification button. Flip that, reverse it. Hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. It really helps us out. Also, go check us out on the listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and go check out the description of the show, where you can find the link to all of our sponsors. And as Smitty said last episode, if you are a sponsor that is interested in sponsoring Around the 412, being highlighted on here and being in the link in the description of the show, hit us up. We are also always willing to listen to new sponsors, especially if you're a Pittsburgh related business or in the local area. It definitely makes a ton of sense to be on this show. So hit us up if you're interested. This is the Steelers episode, and man, how long are we going to have to wait until Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler? That is the question. But
I wish I had a definitive answer. Yeah, I wish I had a definitive answer. I understand it's been annoying for the fan base. You know, you're just like waiting. You want to know who your starting quarterback is, and I'm sure there's even been players on the team that are like, can we just like have our quarterback set in stone so I know who the starting quarterback is, who I'm catching passes from, who's going to be handing me the ball, who am I hiking the ball to. I think those questions are certainly fair. I don't sense that that's like the organization pressing, because I think the organization is so confident that this is going to happen that it really doesn't matter to them.
Like last year.
In terms of what? Oh, Ayuk.
Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, but like, yeah, there was a lot more, I think, to that. Like, I understand
that
what
one.
You're saying,
that one was.
But he was on a different.
I'm just saying that more of a
like,
joke because it seemed like the Steelers were pretty confident. Omar Khan was pretty confident it was going to get done.
But I was questioning why they would be that confident last year about that, because anytime you talk about a player on another roster as opposed to like free to sign with whoever, that's to me a lot different. So there's definitely still that same optimism that Aaron's going to sign. I still have that same optimism that Aaron is going to sign. In terms of like when it's going to be, I know that they would love to have him around for OTAs. You know, I know that Schefter said
we have like 3 weeks until OTAs.
That's mandatory. OTAs are like next week.
Oh, are they next week? Oh.
Yeah. So I know Schefter said like in a week or so he thinks that Aaron will have signed, but like the back end.
Haven't I heard that every week for the past 2 months?
Yeah, like what's the or so? Like there's you're leaving a lot open for interpretation there in terms of
that or so has an asterisk on the end of it, and that asterisk says in fine print it could be within the next 2 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I said. So even somebody asked us about this. So honestly, I should just give them the credit if we're going to talk about this, because I don't know how much it's going to come up again. Zebo Sports said Aaron Rodgers answer coming soon. Like again, no idea when this is going to come. I just feel like it's going to still. The one thing that I want to say is I want to add context to this, because I see a lot of people upset that he's doing other things. Like, you know, he was at a Mike just Mike concert. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was at the Kentucky Derby. And people are like, you know, if he can do these other things despite what's going on close to him, whatever that personal situation is. And he opened up a little bit about that on the Joe Rogan podcast, saying that he's got a couple people that are close to him that are dealing with cancer. Despite that, he's been able to do these other things. And Alan made a really good point where it's like those things, though, like if he had to, he can break that commitment, right? Like you can cancel going to a concert. You can cancel a podcast appearance. You can cancel going to the Kentucky Derby if something were to happen. You can't cancel being on the Pittsburgh Steelers all of a sudden. Like that's a commitment that he cannot break once he makes it. So I get it. That's a good point. Certainly makes sense and added perspective and context that I think was necessary to the situation. In my mind, it's still going to happen. It's just like it always has, doesn't have the timeline that the fans want to have. Like this is very open-ended. That's why I say the or so on the back end of Schefter's statement there is very open-ended. It could be OTAs. It could be not until mandatory camp. It could be training camp. Like, I don't know. What I will say is I have no question in terms of how quick he's going to pick. Like, he could show up for training camp and I'm sure have the playbook down. I wouldn't have
that would be my deadline of where I'd want it to. I wouldn't want it to go any further than training camp. But as long as he signs, if he signs before training camp, I'm not sweating it. Like, it doesn't matter. It's if we get to training camp and then that's still not signed. That's where I'd get a little more hesitant about everything. But right now, he's a Steeler until he's not. I think it's going to happen. I don't want to say I know it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. But I'm giving the timeline really up until training camp is where my deadline would be as far as Aaron Rodgers being a Pittsburgh Steeler. Anytime before that, anytime in between, I don't care when it happens. I'm not sweating it.
I think, Tomlin's kind of said the same thing, at least publicly. Not sure how he feels about it privately. I mean, I hear that for sure. And again, I wouldn't question his ability to get the playbook down and everything like that. I've brought this up before, but it's like, my only thing is Aaron is very detail oriented and needs like certain things. Like, he has very specific hand like gestures and stuff, like checks that he goes to that him and his receivers need to be on the same page about. And that takes time. Like, I think he needs as much time around the guys that are going to be catching passes from him as possible. I know he's thrown to DK, and I know he's been in communication with a couple other guys that are going to be catching passes from him. But, like, you can't replicate that, in my opinion. Like, you need those reps. So I'm hopeful. DB said June 10th would be, like, his hard cutoff date. I mean, I hesitate to even, like, put a hard cutoff date on it before training camp like you. But in terms of what I would like is it's already been done. But I think that he needs to be around for mandatory. Like, when things become mandatory, I think that he should be on the team.
Okay,
OTAs,
so June 10th.
OTAs are more of a hope.
June 10th is when they go to the mini camp.
Okay.
Is that what basically what DB's saying?
That must have
assuming?
been. That must have been. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like that's whenever they actually or I guess it's the first day of the mandatory mini camp is June 10th. So his cutoff is the mandatory mini camp. Mine would be training camp, like, mainly because I just don't think that there is a ton of I don't want to say viable options on the team right now. Like, obviously, I feel like Mason Rudolph is a capable starter. He can win you some games with the current roster that you've constructed. But there's nobody else that's really like, if Aaron Rodgers shows up, everybody knows he's a starter. It's not really a conversation. It's not even like last year where there's going to be people pounding the table, or really any year in the past several years, because even before then you had Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. Then the debate there. Last year you had Russ and Justin Fields. If Aaron Rodgers shows up, there's no debate. Mason Rudolph is your backup. Aaron Rodgers is going to be your starter. So that's why, to me, I'm fine with the later date, but I feel like there should be, obviously, at some point, the Steelers need to say, okay, enough's enough. We have to get this settled out. And I'm fine with Aaron Rodgers taking his time. Like I said, it's not really that big of a deal to me that he's not signed on May 22nd as of recording this podcast. I don't think it's that big of a deal. As you get closer to training camp, that kind of escalates a little bit. And so I think that that's a conversation that will continue to evolve as you go down the line. Now, if the report is true and in a week or so, whatever that or so is, he is going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, then all of this conversation is for naught. And we're worried about the wrong thing. He's going to be there for the mandatory minicamp. He'll be there for training camp. He can get those reps down with his receivers and everything. But until that is happening, I feel like there's just an open-ended answer as far as Aaron Rodgers being a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. Like you, I think it's going to happen. Just, I don't know when. I don't really care when, to a certain degree either.
Yeah. We'll see how this plays out. I think the end result is Aaron Rodgers being a Pittsburgh Steeler. I'm pretty confident about it. The only, I don't think he's doing anywhere else.
It's that, so, or retirement in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't
see whatever he's dealing with when it comes to I don't know if conclusion is the right word to use there. Whenever we get past whatever he's talking about that he's dealing with and needs to work through, is he still going to have the desire to play football with whatever that is happening? That's my question. That'd be the only thing that I think impacts him being a Pittsburgh Steeler in 2025. So yeah, appreciate that. This is going to continue to be a conversation basically until he signs, in my opinion. So we'll see. I really like this one that literally just came in as we're sitting here from Cliff the Dark Knight. Calvin Austin feels like an extension candidate, starting punt returner, wide receiver 3, who potentially could play into a wide receiver 2 role depending on how they fill out the roster. Seems like a great locker room guy. What do you think a fair contract is for him? I mean, this is honestly 100% transparency. Something I've given zero thought to. Yes, he is due an extension. After this year was drafted the same year as George Pickens. And it certainly brings value to this team, and even maybe more so depending on when and if they do add another receiver. I don't know that I'd call last year like a true like breakout season, but he definitely took a step forward and was a big part of the offense last year. I'm like looking around at wide receiver contracts. I think if he replicates or even takes another leap, he could at least be within like the Tutu Atwell, Diami Brown range. And those guys are making $10 million a season. So I don't know. Like, I think he probably could push for like a 3-year, $30 million contract. I think what's super interesting about this conversation is like the Steelers and paying second contracts to receivers. We just haven't seen it happen. And it'd be funny if Calvin Austin's like, you look at Deontay Johnson was obviously the last one. Before that, you're going back even for like quite a while to a guy that they paid a second contract to at receiver. So is this finally the guy? Or I shouldn't say finally, because it's not like Deontay was that long ago. Is he the guy that gets added to a very short list? Because you wouldn't have thought about him that way, in my opinion. But certainly a conversation worth having when you look at the lack of investment that's been there beyond obviously one guy. Is he the second guy to do so? Would you pay Calvin Austin like $10 million a season?
My answer is probably going to depend on what 2025 looks like. He took a nice step in 2024.
So again, I want to add that caveat that I'm talking, he's got to at least replicate, if not take another step in 25 to what he did in 24 to even be in this conversation.
Yeah, 2024, he was a solid receiver and a good returner, and I feel like that's something that's valuable to have around, especially from the special teams aspect of it all. But I need to at least see, like you're saying, the same thing in 2025 before I think about extending him. As you're saying, the Steelers have a short list of guys that they actually give second contracts to in the receiver room, and I feel like you need to impress, and maybe the special teams is the reason that he impresses in that aspect, and that pushes him over the edge for something like that. But as of right now, I would be hesitant based off of the production that he's had so far in his career. Missed out on a rookie season, didn't really do anything in his sophomore season, which was ultimately his real rookie season, and then had a nice 24. But 3 years, $30 million for just the 1 year off this guy. That's why I'm 2025 would be so dependent for me on this.
And obviously, I think the guarantee would probably be like 10 to 15, probably guaranteed.
Yeah, and another thing that plays into this too is like, what is the wide receiver room looking like? Obviously, for the future, you're going to have DK Metcalf now, but Robert Woods ain't hanging around here that long. I got to imagine the same thing with some of the guys on the end of the roster. I mean, we'll see what the actual wide receiver room looks like to 2025, but like, you're not counting on like Ben Skoranek or Scotty Miller or any of these guys as future pieces. The only other future piece that you have, just because of when he was drafted and he's going to be on the roster still, is Roman Wilson, and who in the world knows what he's going to look like either. So maybe from that standpoint, if you're not willing to add to the position in other ways, an in-house re-signing of Calvin Austin would be the reason that they do that, just because there's not a ton of depth at that wide receiver position, which we talked about at length with the Steelers over the last really just 2 years. But also, several of the guys are going to be leaving that room. And I think that's something that the Steelers will have to replicate and replace.
Yeah, I mean, draft needs change throughout the course of the season. Like, depending on how it goes, things could change. But say things go well in 2025, in 2026, we should be talking about quarterback, we should be talking about cornerback, and we should be talking about receiver again. So, like, if they're going to invest heavily in receiver, maybe something like that doesn't make sense and you just let him walk. I'm not sure. But I certainly think when you look at the guys that are making $10 million, like the names that I brought up, Dimey Brown making $10 million this season. Like I think Calvin's agent's looking at that like, yeah, I mean, based off what I've done, I certainly deserve that. Tutu Atwell, I mean, okay. Like I think Calvin Austin with a good year in 25 certainly deserves to be stacked up with those two guys, which are making $10 million. Maybe that's not the barometer that I should be looking at, but like cap should continue to rise too. So $10 million at the receiver position in 2025, that's not, I don't think that's going to be, or I should say in 2026, it's going to look a lot different. So I don't know. It depends on not only the investments, if there is another one coming this offseason, but also what are the draft plans? Because I think right now that's probably within the top 3 of what they're looking at in 2026 draft.
I'd agree with that. And also, if you want to take it a little further with Tutu Atwell specifically, I'm just looking at a 1-for-1 comparison of what the numbers are looking like with those guys. In 2023, his third year in the league, Tutu Atwell had 483 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. Last year, he had 562 yards and 0 touchdowns. If Calvin Austin, who last year had 548 yards and 4 touchdowns, like we're saying, can replicate what he did just last year, he's already in a better place than Tutu Atwell was. So for sure, that contract would be justified. And obviously, what we're saying now, dependent on what the draft needs and what the signings and everything are going to look like to fill in that wide receiver room. But I would fully expect a wide receiver still going to be on the table until they get a few guys that are going to be here for several years in a row, mainly like draft picks is what I'm trying to say. Like, I don't imagine the Steelers are signing several guys to multi-term contracts. But until they get a few guys that are going to be several years in a row, I feel like wide receiver is going to continue to be not necessarily an issue for the Steelers, but just something that they're going to have to figure out on a year-by-year basis. And because right now they're pretty much in the same place they were last year. You're just swapping out DK Metcalf and George Pickens.
Much more expensive, but yes, I agree. Still just right now, a lot of question marks as you go down on the depth chart, but at the top of it, you still got that one game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. And DK Metcalf shirts over there right now for you to go get. If you want to, I would almost advise that you do wait. Potentially he could change his number. I did not. I got it with him rocking the number 4. So selfishly kind of hoping he sticks with that, but certainly a change to 14 could be in the cards for DK Metcalf, but go get yourself a shirt, save yourself $10 using code AT412 for whatever design that you like the most on the website. So yeah, we'll see. Really like that question. We'll see if Calvin Austin does have a long-term future in Pittsburgh. Let's discuss a little Will Howard. Plain and simple, Maddie says, what's a realistic situation and where we get to see Howard this year if by chance Rodgers doesn't sign? I honestly want to see what he's made of. I mean,
I think the question is if Rodgers isn't signing or is signing for isn't signing. Because I think if he is signing, there's a lot that has to go wrong. At least right now. So
well,
there's a lot that has to go wrong.
If he's signing, Aaron has to get hurt, in my opinion. But then the path with Mason in front of him, to me, is just like we get towards the end of the year and they're not competing for anything, and it's just give Will Howard a look. So whether that's with Aaron on the roster or not could obviously change that because you need an injury to happen to Aaron to get to that situation. But say it's just Mason and Will Howard, I think at some point you would turn the keys over if you're not competing for anything just to see what he has before you take a quarterback in 26. So I don't know that he's going to prevent them from taking a quarterback, like unless both guys in front of him get hurt early and then he lights it up, leads the Steelers to a crazy season that we never see. Like that is very small percent chance.
Tom Brady? Ever heard of him before?
Yeah. Yeah. Very slim chance that is the path for Will Howard, but it exists. Like there's a world where it happens. I'm not talking down to anybody here, but like at least specifically, this Will Howard conversation's gotten ridiculous in my mind. Like the way people are talking about this kid. Like I'm an Ohio State fan. Watched every snap that Will Howard took last year. In my opinion, I said this before, I thought out of every quarterback that came out, he had the best stretch of football during the college football playoff. He also looked absolutely awful at times and did not look like somebody that should even be drafted prior to that. And I know that he got hurt and is playing through injuries, but that's also part of the game. He's also like can be tough to evaluate because of the weapons that he's playing with. Like, you know, whether fair or not, I think that's something people are going to bring up. What does he look like when he's not throwing to those alphas on both sides? So I just think there's a lot of questions there with Will Howard. I thought he was a 4th round pick that they got really good value getting in the 6th round. But still, had he been picked where I thought he should have been, that's still the likeliest outcome as being a backup quarterback in the NFL. I think he is Mason Rudolph if Mason Rudolph was a plus athlete. That is what Will Howard is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I feel like people a lot of the time will I don't know if it's just because they don't want to remember or if they genuinely just don't know that like Mason Rudolph was pretty good college quarterback, especially like as an upperclassman.
Yeah.
I feel like people don't really remember that. And they just look at what he was his first several years with the Steelers, particularly that 2019 year where everybody kind of just turned on him all at once.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good description of him. If he was a plus athlete, he's pretty much similar to like what Mason Rudolph was coming out. And I was asked this too earlier this week by somebody at my church that follows the NFL draft a lot. He actually pretty cool. Every single year, so I didn't get to go to this because we do our live show. Every single year, he rents out a room at the Buffalo Wild Wings, the local Buffalo Wild Wings, and they have like 20 to 25 guys go and watch the NFL draft and hang out during the entire draft for like 5 hours, which obviously I didn't get to go, but it's like he knows his stuff. He was asking me like, what's my favorite pick for the Steelers? And I said there's a couple different answers, but like obviously my favorite based off of just strictly value at the value for the pick, I said was Will Howard. And that does not mean that I think that Will Howard is going to come in and light it up and he's going to be this long-term starter. I even told him that I think if Will Howard just turns into a longer-term backup for the Steelers, just to have that kind of guy in your locker room and having that option as your backup, I think that would be a win for the Steelers, especially considering where they drafted him, where you're talking about like fringe area for like maybe this guy doesn't even get on the roster. But if that's what he turned into, I think that's great. But if Will Howard is going to get into games in 2025, I think that you're either going to need to see injuries happen or a scenario that you played out where Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign, the team is not winning, and they just throw him in at the end of the year to see what they can get out of him for a couple games because they're not going anywhere. And that's about it. I don't see at any point this season, even if Rodgers is not here, where I think Will Howard is going to take over Mason Rudolph as the starter just strictly based off his merit and his gameplay. I don't think that he is necessarily that type of player that people should expect to have. Now, if he went out there and he did and he won the job fair and square, I'll eat crow on that one, and I will be happy to see that. I'll be interested to see that. What kind of player could they get out of him? But I just don't think that there should be much expectation for Will Howard in 2025, if at all. I said it whenever they drafted him and after the show, like there's a good chance that you do not see Will Howard at all in 2025. And that does not change in taking him in the draft, especially where they did it, when they could have taken him a couple rounds. If you would have swapped, not necessarily swapped Jack Sawyer, because I don't think Jack Sawyer was a 6th-round talent, but like if you would have swapped Jack Sawyer and Will Howard, I don't think anybody would have batted an eye just based off where Will Howard would have been drafted. But even if he was drafted a couple rounds earlier, I don't think that changes your draft plans for 2026. I don't think that changes your quarterback plans for 2025. I think you're getting potentially a viable backup, a good leader. Like I like the kid. I like the personality. I think he's good. He's good to have it in the locker room, and he's a winner in college and knows what it takes to win. Won a national championship. I think those are all valuable traits, but I don't necessarily think that he is going to be a starter in 2025 unless certain circumstances happen due to injury or due to the Steelers are just so far out of it. I don't think based off of merit, his rookie season, we're going to see him take the field.
Talk about, what translates, what doesn't, college production. The SEC, I think, we would widely consider that's the conference in college football, right? You would agree?
Yeah.
The 4 players with the most offensive yards produced in the SEC, quarterbacks, Aaron Murray, Drew Lock, Tim Tebow, and Jackson Dart joined that club this past season. So TBD, obviously, on Jackson Dart, although I'm not high on what his NFL prospects are. Those other 3, that just tells you right there, like playing college quarterback and playing NFL quarterback are 2 very different things. And while I think there's some things to take away from Will Howard's game, which is why I believe he's going to be an NFL quarterback, I don't project him as a long-term NFL starter. I think he could potentially be a plus backup spot starter. Again, who does it sound like I'm talking about? Mason Rudolph. I think that's the type of prospect he was. I think that's the caliber of player he's going to be at the NFL level. So I understand why. Go ahead.
I'll give you another name. Since you're naming off SEC quarterbacks, someone that I really liked in college, but at the NFL level, never really was a starter, was a career backup, spot starter, even won a few national championships in college, kind of same path as, obviously different schools, different path, didn't go into the transfer portal because it didn't exist and everything like that. But would anybody complain for the Steelers, especially based off where they drafted him, if he turned into AJ McCarron? If he was a career backup that could be a spot starter and get you a couple wins if you needed it. I wouldn't mind if he had an AJ McCarron career. Obviously, I hope more for him, but if that's where his ceiling was, I still think that where the Steelers got him is still good value for that.
And here's the thing too, that has a ton of value in those first 4 years. Where it becomes tricky is then what do you pay in a back quarterback? Because the whole thing is the value is finally getting a back quarterback on a rookie contract, so you don't have to keep paying $4 or $5 million plus for back quarterbacks like Mason Rudolph. Yeah. So, we'll see. Obviously, if we get to that point, then it was probably a success on the first contract where you want to bring him back to at least be the backup quarterback to whoever it is in 26, and we can talk about that. We have a question about the 26 quarterbacks, but if I wouldn't predict that Will Howard plays this year in the regular season. The time to watch Will Howard is going to be in the preseason. If you really want to see Will Howard, you're probably really looking forward to this preseason coming up because he should see a ton of snaps.
Mm-hmm. What would you set for his regular season snap count, offensive snap count? What would you set his over-under at?
The thing is, I say it's not likely just because I think it's hard to project injury. But
sure,
Aaron's
no injuries happen. What would you set an over-under snap count have?
Yeah.
I would probably set it at I don't know, 6.5, 7.5. Maybe he goes out there and takes a knee.
Yeah, I'm saying lower. The one caveat that I think is there, though, that exists is if you get to a point where week 18 is meaningless, even with Mason Rudolph on the roster, would you rather have Will Howard start that game? So I think that's the one thing that could be interesting.
Good point.
But when have they played a game that was, for one reason or another, meaningless in week 18? So
yeah,
I don't know. I'll go 3.5.
Okay.
But I think he could, preseason should be pretty fun. All right, let's talk about some receivers. And we actually get some questions about receivers. Hobito asked about receivers. I'm just going to lump them all together. J Mars asked about receivers. Jack asked about receivers. So I'll break them up and then we're going to combine them all into one conversation. Jack said, is Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen on Pittsburgh's radar? Jamar said, who are some good wide receiver 2 options that could be available via trade and what would you give up for them? And then Hobito said, have you heard of any names being thrown around for potential wide receivers? And if so, who? Well, I mean, I discuss anytime that I hear about receivers. Was that before last week's episode or no with Chris Olave?
I don't think so. I don't think we talked about Olave.
Yeah, so I mean, if
it
I
was
wanted
after.
to, if I felt so strongly about it, I could have put it out there like 3 days before anybody else even brought it up. But I didn't get that. I couldn't get a second person to confirm it, so I don't.
What a weird flex.
So Steelers Sanctuary, my guys over there, they got a little bit of scoop that no one else did like 3 days before it was even put out there. So yeah, they called the Saints about Chris Olave and we're pretty much just told no. Don't even know what that price would have to be. That's a situation where very similarly to like how the Ayuk thing played out, and I don't think Olave's going to run this playbook, but he'd have to make it ugly this summer for him to even be like on the table to be traded. But the Steelers did check in with them to see what it would cost, and we're basically told no. He's an interesting case too, just because 5 documented concussions in the NFL, which is super scary. They've all taken place at home though. So I wonder if there's something to like getting him off that turf and what it would be like if he was out of New Orleans. And he also, like, I know they picked up the 5th-year option, but he's going to need a new contract. He was also part of that 2022 wide receiver class. So he's going to be looking for money in a new deal here in the near future too. So I don't know how you weigh all those things. Don't even think it's going to end up being a discussion, but just putting it out there. Terry McLaurin's name coming up recently today as he's looking for a new contract. I mean, the Steelers checked on him last year. This was obviously before Washington just went to the NFC title game. So I don't think Washington's going to be in the market for trading away one of their best offensive players, especially in year 2 of Jaden Daniels. I think they're going to find a way to keep him around. 29 years old, certainly at least within that DK Metcalf tier. So I think he'll push for $30 million a year on his next contract for sure. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers are probably going to call them. They're going to get told no, just like on the Chris Olave thing. Like, they're going to turn over every stone they can here. One where I do think that there is a realistic possibility here, whether it's like right now or as we get closer to, when cutdowns have to happen. Like, I know it's been talked about, so I'm not breaking any news here, but we got to keep an eye on the Packers, like, truthfully, because somebody can't make that room. Like, a good wide receiver cannot make that room with the abundance of receivers that they have there. They've called them about Romeo Doubs. They've called him out Dontavian Wicks. Dobbs hits free agency after this year, so obviously I think that's the player that they would be more motivated to move. I think Wicks fits what the Steelers need more. He's more of that Deontay Johnson type of player, better route runner. ESPN open store, 4th in the entire league last year, drops the ball a ton as well. I think the drop rate was probably the highest, or certainly within the top 5 or bottom 5, depending on how you look at it, last year in the NFL. But he fits the skill set, I think, of what they need opposite of DK Metcalf more. I just think there'd probably be more of a reluctance from the Packers to move him. Said it last year too, but keep an eye on Houston's room. I mean, they added 2 wide receivers, both from Iowa State as well. I know that they don't have Tank Dell, obviously, or anything like that, but like John Mechie or Xavier Hutchinson could certainly still be on the way out with them adding Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins. So we'll see what happens with that room, but that would be one to watch for me too. What I'm getting at within talking about all of these with trade options, though, is like, I know it's to be frustrating to hear because we just had the same conversation a year and a half ago, basically, or 14, 15 months, I should say, not a year and a half, but it's going to take time. Like, this is not a May conversation. This is like an August conversation. If you're talking about trading for one of these guys, I don't think it happens right now. I think it happens as we get closer to through training camp and cut down day, where teams start to fill out their depth charts. And there's a guy that probably should be on an NFL roster that's going to be on the outs in a room. So that's what I'll say about the trade candidates. And then real quick, just because Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen were brought up within this as well, I haven't heard anything regarding either of those guys, specifically as it pertains to Steelers. Maybe those talks are happening internally, but I only typically hear about it if they had actually reached out to the player and wanted to bring them in. I feel like that's typically where I end up hearing about things, is if I know that a player is coming in. So if they're having conversations behind the scene right now about them, that's very possible. If you're going between those two, give me Keenan Allen, even though he is 34 years old. Last year, still 7 touchdowns, over 700 yards. It's like low end wide receiver 2 production. And I think you got to get more creative with him because he is better in the slot. Calvin can play outside. He's so fast and he's got a pretty good route tree, and his release package is pretty solid. So like he can, and then, running Keenan maybe in some like condensed splits, and you can get creative with the way that you would use them. It's not an ideal scenario to have one of those two play on the outside, but like from a skill set perspective, I think it makes sense. Like a DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Calvin Austin, Roman, like that makes sense for building a wide receiver room. It's just not ideal because you don't have that other like X type receiver, Z type receiver necessarily on the outside. But that would be my preference if they were going the free agent route. I just haven't heard anything about it.
I don't know how much weight this will hold in the Steelers, front office. You'll see why I had the Freudian slip in a second. Since there was a rain delay during the Pirates game as we're recording this episode, Alex Stumpf is doing an AMA, and I asked the question, who should the Steelers pursue for wide receiver depth in 2025? His answer was Amari Cooper. Like I said, don't know how much weight Alex Stumpf's opinion is going to have on the Omar Khan and the Steelers front office. However, I mean, as far as free agency goes, that is really realistically 2 of the options that the Steelers are looking at. Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, or not that they're looking at, that they probably would look at. Just as far as availability, there's just really not a lot out there as free agency.
I'll be honest,
which is why I think the trade talk is so prevalent right now for wide receiver, even more so last year than it was, because of the state of the free agency market right now. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say about Amari Cooper, had he bounced back in Buffalo, then I could see it. I just think he's done. Like, it wasn't just the drops, and I understand he had a wrist injury, so like chalk the drop percentage spiking up to that. I just think like the lower half, like he looked way less explosive. The routes weren't as crisp. Like he's always been known as one of the better route runners in the league, and he just fell off a cliff last year. I just think he's done. So if you feel like he's going to bounce back, then it just wasn't healthy last year, then sure, because he would make more sense in terms of a guy that can play outside more than Keenan Allen can at this point in his career. But I don't believe that he has anything left in the tank. So that's why I would lean Keenan Allen. Like I still saw Keenan Allen produce when he was on the field last year. That's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. But that goes back to what I was saying. Like, I just feel like looking at the free agency market right now with some of the top end guys in free agency, and then the top end is pretty shallow right now. I mean, you have Keelan Allen and Amari Cooper up there, but we've talked about Gabe Davis. I mean, DJ Chark. That's really the only realistic options that I see the Steelers would want to go after in free agency at all.
Do you think it says anything that Gabe Davis went on a couple free agent visits and didn't sign?
I feel like that injury is a problem. Like, there's a reason that he was released. And I feel like teams are probably weighing that into their decisions. Like, I would think that if you're just looking at Gabe Davis, the player outside of the injury, I would think that he's going on a few free agent visits, he would be signed by now. But the fact that he's not leads me to believe that injury could be more serious than what leads to believe. And that's why he was released by Jacksonville. But I think as far as trades go, that's why trades are being brought up so much again, whether that is Terry McLaurin, Chris Olave, or if you're looking at Houston or Green Bay, is just because the wide receiver room free agency market is so shallow right now when you have several options. I mean, if you're looking at Green Bay and Houston combined, those two teams have just as many wide receivers that I think could be realistic options for the Steelers to trade for as the free agent market has the Steelers to sign. So that's why I think that there's obviously it ended up being a potential trade that obviously shot the Steelers in the foot last season because they waited too long. And that's actually something that I want to bring up too. And I wanted to ask you when you were talking about those trade options too. Do you think that the Steelers, and I know that it is more so playing the long game when you do get into these trade talks, because you got to have to see how rosters are playing out with cuts and everything, and you have to see how training camp goes for a lot of these players in the preseason. But do you think that the Steelers would have less patience because of getting burned last year in the Ayuk deal, and less patience to not wait around and just kind of sit on their hands waiting for a trade to happen for them. Do you think that they'd be more proactive this season and not wait around as long just because of what happened last year?
I mean, if there's ample opportunity, like more options, I think it's more imperative to cast a wider net. Like last year, I know that they checked in on guys, but like they were basically putting their all
It was
their eggs
Ayuk or
in the Brandon
bust.
Ayuk basket. Yeah. So I think that, like, if you are, I mean, I'm of the opinion that they certainly need to add somebody to upgrade this room. I'm not 100% sure the Steelers feel that way. So if they don't, then maybe it doesn't happen. And they don't, like, they're not going to make a trade just to make a trade or make a signing just to make a signing. But I'm of the opinion that a good enough player is going to be out there where a player is going to get cut that at the very least could be like your wide receiver 4. Well, I guess it depends on what Roman ends up being. But although somebody that gets cut in Green Bay or somebody that gets cut in Houston is probably better than Robert Woods. Like, Robert Woods is one of, I love Robert Woods. Like 3 years ago, love him. But he's not that same dude. Like, you're talking about a 33-year-old wide receiver. So I don't know that. I don't know what my answer is to that. I guess my answer is they got to cast a wider net. It's that simple than they did last year.
I think that's fair. I think that would change the answer a little bit, as far as what or how long that they're actually going to wait around for these things to happen.
Well, okay, so just that part of it though, like, yeah, I think they're going to wait. They'll be willing to wait on that. Like I'm saying, I think they could take this down to cut down day and be able to get a player that is better than is currently in the room from somewhere. So, but like that, a player like Ayuk, I mean, unless things get ugly contractually for Terry McLaurin or get ugly contractually for Cortland Sutton again this year, like there's not a player that's like that type of needle mover. I think like one of the Packers dudes is the most somewhat realistic, somewhat needle moving move they can make. Because either one of those two dudes are clearly the second best receiver on this team right now.
Sure. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that about anybody else out there.
I would agree with you. I think that's definitely the team I would look at to make a trade with. And if I'm just looking at free agent guys and trade potentials, I think trade's the way you got to go, because I don't know how much you're actually getting out of any of these.
Like, so then I guess the question somebody asked this too is like, what are we willing to give up in a trade?
Do you think the price goes up for teams knowing how desperate the Steelers are to get a wide receiver?
No. I don't think. I mean, the question isn't to me desperation. It's how many other teams are also looking for a receiver that can get involved in a potential deal. So I don't think the Steelers' desperation on its own moves the needle. I think other teams being involved could. Because if I'm thinking about it, like, I think a 4th-round pick is probably the sweet spot for me. Because I don't want to give up a 3rd because that's what we got back for George. And I understand there's more variables to that. But to trade the same thing that we got for George back for a Dontavian Wicks or a Romeo Dobbs, I'm not necessarily interested in doing that. I think a 4th-round pick is okay. I think a 4th-round pick would be fine, especially for Wicks. Dobbs is a little bit tougher just because I definitely like the player, but he's a pending free agent. So,
yeah, that's true. Someone is saying that, or one sports outlet is saying that the trade value for Dobbs could be a 5th-round pick. So, and then maybe that plays into the free agency aspect of it.
Sure.
So, I mean, I agree with you too.
4th for Wicks, 5th for
Dobbs.
Dobbs.
I think those are fair trades, and I think those are still like looking at, especially with the acquisition of all the picks that the Steelers have next year. I feel like that would be an easy yes from Omar Khan to make trades like that. But obviously, it takes 2 to tango. We'll see how that plays out. I think that the Steelers are better suited to look for a trade this year than the free agency market. And that's not necessarily how I felt last year, because last year I felt like there were guys in free agency, even whether it was like when free agency opened up or post draft or even midsummer, that they could have gotten somewhere instead of just waiting for a Brandon Ayuk trade to happen. I feel the opposite this year, where I feel like waiting on a trade to happen is probably more valuable to the Steelers' efforts in 2025, just because I think you're going to ultimately get the better player there.
Yeah. Speaking of Omar Khan and 2026 and having a bunch of draft picks, Omar Khan actually had a question for us. Not a question necessarily. He just wants us to talk about 2026 quarterbacks. I think I put out this take, like I'm standing by this until we obviously get to the college football season and I start to see him play. My early guy is Cade Klubnik. And I was very happy to see there was even a mock draft I saw where he was going first overall. Now, I didn't love that it was to the Browns, but I felt a little bit validated that there was an outlet that put him first overall in that. So where are you at with the 2026 quarterback class? Do you feel as strongly about it, like being a good class as a lot of other people, or are you more, let's wait and see?
So I do feel I feel strongly about it being a good quarterback class, but I feel like there might be a little bit of recency bias playing into that, because I think a lot of people will compare it to just the 2025's class. And I feel like that you're far and few between trying to compare it to 2025's class and finding a draft class worse than the 2025 one. But I do think that it is going to be quite it'll be quite an uptick in talent for this year's class. I do like Cade Klubnik a lot out of Clemson. He's somebody that I think the Steelers should be interested in. He's a great athlete too. Like having athleticism.
Yeah, Pitt found that out.
Yeah, Pitt did find that out. But having someone that's a great athlete at the position too, I feel like it's just becoming more and more valuable in today's, I don't even want to just say NFL, but just today's football. Like whether that is the high school, college, or NFL level, you're just seeing great athletes at the quarterback position. Another guy that I am, how do I put this? I'm hesitant to say that I am interested in just because of where he goes to school, but I think the Steelers would have interested in him in his Drew Aller out of Penn State. Didn't come out this year, which I said is the smartest thing that young man could have done. I thought that
it's weird because it's like, to me,
it is, but it's not at the same time.
Yeah. Like he would have clearly been at worst the number 2 in this behind Cam Ward this year, but he is so far away individually that it made sense to go back.
That's why I think it was made sense to come back. I think there's a lot more that you can get out of him as a player. And so I wanted him to go back to Penn State. But at the same time, the point has to be made that he could have been like he probably would have been a first round QB. Yeah, he would have been a high pick. I feel good about this quarterback class, at least the top end guys. The one thing, and maybe this is a hot take, I think this opinion is growing more and more as people are talking about the 2026 quarterback class. I do not think Arch Manning is coming out. I do not think that he will be in the NFL draft. Everybody's saying that it's tank for Manning next year, and I do not think that he will be coming out. I have a hard time believing that he will be drafted next year.
I mean, if you want to believe his family, which I think is fair to do so, it doesn't sound like they want him. Like they want him to get more.
Listen, if his dad and his uncles were not going to allow him to transfer from Texas when it was clear that he was not going to be the starter, they're not going to allow him to leave early. They're going to make him graduate. They're going to make him play all 4 years.
And from a money standpoint, that's, NIL. Like that doesn't need to be as much of part of a conversation. If he has the type of year that he warrants being the number 1 pick, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, interesting debate to have. But if he has just a pretty solid year and you still have the Nussmeyers and Klubniks of the world above him, and he'd be the 3rd or 4th guy, then I think it's a no-brainer that he goes back. I mean, I think the same conversation could be had about Lenoris Sellers at South Carolina about him going back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Sellers is another one that I don't think has to come out next year and find success. He can find success elsewhere. And maybe
Lagway?
Maybe I am an idiot for this take. I am not sold on Nussmeier. There's a lot that I saw last year that I did not love. And maybe it is the Will Howard effect where it's at times he looked really, really good, but at other times I just thought he looked pretty average. And so obviously 2025 still has to happen for the college football season, but like coming out of 2024, I was not in love with Garrett Nussmeier like a lot of people were.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that there's a lot of projection there, and I think
Sure.
like above the neck, I think that he's probably like the best processor right now, son of an offensive coordinator. Like I think that there's a lot of things that people are buying into right now that we haven't actually seen put on display yet that people just assume is coming next year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. But yeah, I'm buying into the 2026 class. I think that there is going to be someone worth getting at quarterback in this next year's class. And maybe
you could
it's
probably
somebody
not even have to jump up like massively for it. You could probably be picking somewhere in like the 10 to 12 range and still get a guy with the guys. Well, again, there's projection that's going into this, but on paper, looking at this class, it's not like it's going to be like a 1 or 2 quarterback class where you got to be picking the top 5.
Mm-mm.
Like the trade up won't have to be as significant if this class plays out the way we think it's going to.
Yeah, and I think that there's guys that could play themselves into higher picks. I know that
We
these
haven't
are
even brought
also
up some people's favorites. Mendoza
Mendoza.
at
A lot of
Indiana.
people depending on the year that he has at OU, but like probably coming from Washington State, a lot of people probably like John Mateer too.
Yeah.
From that air raid offense.
Why is the name slipping me? Michigan State's quarterback, Aiden Childs.
Yeah, in Charles. Mm-hmm.
Another guy a lot of people are talking about right now. Like
A lot of people high on, especially after the year he had last year, Sam Levitt out of Arizona State. I'm sure
yeah.
our boy Richie's going to be high on him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How many guys have we talked about so far? Like 8? I mean, there's not all of them are going. There's going to be guys that obviously don't have the type of year that we're talking about worth first round pick consideration. There's also guys that are going to take a leap, though, like on the other end of that. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, let's be conservative here. 5 or 6 guys are going round 1, in my opinion. We saw 6 guys go in 2023. I think it's going to be right up there with us.
I think so too. I think that you're going to see it's going to be similar to 22 to 23, that kind of jump as far as like how many people are going to be taken. It'll be interesting to see which of those guys are going to be playing out and being the ones actually taken. But I do think that the Steelers can find somebody. I think that they have draft capital to be able to move up, but also a luxury of, depending on what guy that they're trying to go after, they may not have to move as far as people may think to get a quarterback that could be the guy they build around. So yeah, I think it's a smart thing. Smartest thing they could have done in 2025 is not hamstringing themselves in terms of the 2026 draft class at the quarterback position.
Last one, because I'm very tired and Tyler is sick. Stiller gang here said the Steelers feel comfortable with their cornerback depth. Trice is injury prone. Slay is old, so who knows what he has left in the tank. Would they be interested in signing a guy like Jack Jones, who has prior experience with secondary coach Gerald Alexander? They love Corey Trice. I think I've talked about this on here before, but I know internally there are people that even feel better about him than they do Joey Porter Jr. from just a talent perspective. Certainly the injuries have to be part of the conversation, but the fact that they keep signing guys like Darius Slay, like trading for Dante Jackson and getting these 1-year rentals is because they've kept that door open for Corey Trice to take that leap and snatch that job long term. This to me is a make or break year, though. It has to be. Like, they're going to give him some opportunity. Obviously, he's going to be like the primary backup on the boundary. So how much are we going to see from him? But he could also play he could be the big nickel. He could play in the slot a little bit as well. We've seen that versatility. This is the make or break year for Corey Trice, whether his long-term future's with Pittsburgh, but internally, I know they love him. As it relates to Darius Slay, I know he's 34. He was awesome when he was 33. So unless he has like some massive fall off after, one season, all of a sudden, this is the best CB2 that they've had since probably like Steven Nelson, going opposite of Joey Porter Jr. So I don't see any reason to, I understand there has to be some possibility there that he does fall off a cliff this year just because of the age curve. But unless it hits him super hard, I just don't see it happening where he's not at least a serviceable player on the opposite side, Joey Porter Jr. Also brought in like Brandon Echols, who was a fine backup for the Jets and provides some depth there. So my biggest question is about the slot, like more than anything else. You're bringing up boundary guys like Beanie Bishop, who I like as a player, certainly a contributor, but like just something he can't control, size limitations. Teams line up a bigger guy in the slot. That's a mismatch every single time. Like, so just because of his size, he's kind of fighting an uphill battle at times. And I think teams are going to hunt that mismatch quite often. Then Echols can contribute there. Sebastian Castro, if he makes the roster, they could throw him in the slot. Minka can contribute in the slot as well. So a couple different options, but their lack of investment in the slot has been what's bothered me more than anything else. As far as the Jack Jones part of that, I'm going to say no, just because not even the player. He's got some off-field stuff that he's dealt with in the past. And just going back to like the whole George Pickens trade and why I thought it was so intentional, like they're being very intentional about building this roster. I just don't think that's the type of guy, not necessarily player, but guy they're going to bring into the organization.
I don't know what you're talking about where they don't invest in the slot. They drafted Dante Kent this year. So,
yeah, I'm sure he'll look great on the practice squad this year.
Yeah, that would be great. Honestly, I'll keep this short and sweet because you pretty much said everything that I would say and more. I think that for 2025, the Steelers feel comfortable with their quarterback depth. I think they like Corey Trice a lot, and I think they feel comfortable with Darius Slay. Obviously, after 2025, that answer changes. I think that one of the early spots that could be taken in the draft next year, along with the quarterback conversation we had, is cornerback, trying to find another long-term cornerback, depending on how things play out. And a lot of that plays into how Corey Trice is going to play. Like you said, they want to give him every opportunity to be able to take that job, but obviously they can't just sit around and wait forever. Seems like the Steelers have a tendency to do that for things. But I think that for 2025, they feel comfortable with their cornerback depth and where they're at with that. 2026 and beyond, that answer changes. Yeah.
Like I said, I think that's certainly a spot along with quarterback and wide receiver where we could see a significant investment in 26. Again, we'll stay on the receiver thing. Will it be a free agency signing? Will it be a trade? Or will they wait until we get to training camp and it's somebody that was cut?
Smitty from Around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app, The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there.
Very excited to see how the rest of this thing plays out with Aaron Rodgers, with the receivers. These are keeping conversations, I think, on a weekly basis. If we do a Q&A every single week, I assume we did basically the same question every single week from a lot of people. So appreciate those that kind of steered different paths. Calvin Austin thing was awesome because honestly was not something that's even been on my radar, but be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you were here on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure there's a 5-star review and subscribe over there. And regardless of where you're listening or where you are watching, go do the opposite of what I just said as well. Just subscribe, leave a like, hit the notification bell everywhere. Go to every single platform that you possibly can. Search Around the 412 and do that for us. Same thing on socials. You'll find us at Around the 412. You'll find me at Zachary Smith PGH. You'll find Tyler at Weiler_Teeks33. And you'll find all of our great sponsors in the links in the description, regardless of where you're watching or listening, including Marcelo Electric right above Tyler right now is their logo. It always fits in so nicely with our color scheme as well. Marcelo Electric, Brandon Marcelo, a.k.a. Boots, his small business, one of my good friends, serving Beaver, Allegheny, Lawrence, and Butler County. Residential, commercial, or service calls, hit him up, 724-614-0611. Again, that's 724-614-0611. All his information as well in the Facebook link down below in the description. Go over there, check out all of his work. Go check out his new van as well, looking pretty sweet. But along with Marcelo Electric, download the app, The Cut, book an appointment with Christian. We're going to do a walk-in with Ashley or Tony over at Keek's Barbershop. That's down below as well. And then, of course, Game Changers, gamechanger.la. pick6.la. Save yourself $10 when you use the code AT412 at checkout. In just under an hour, this episode of the Around the 412 Steelers show. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers show, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.